And so our next panel is going to take a look at just how to create a city that can attract new businesses, new residents, and new excitement, all while balancing the complex socioeconomic and environmental issues we face today. And no one is better qualified to lead this discussion than Alan Pullman, who is the founding partner of Studio 111, an urban design and architecture firm based right here in Long Beach. Alan has spent more than 3 decades as an architect while working across various councils and committees in this community. So please welcome to the stage, Alan Pullman.
Good morning. Great to see everyone. Well, we really can't see anyone, but the lights, but I know you're all there. Thanks, Tim, for that great introduction. And as Tim said, we're going to have a design panel and talk about design and explore the relationship between design and the creative economy. And I think we've assembled what I think is a really interesting team. It's a diverse panel to talk about the subject. So I just want to introduce my panelists here today. First off is David Malmuth. He's an innovative real estate professional. David's the founder of the Idea District in downtown San Diego. And over his career, he's developed retail, entertainment, office, and multifamily projects throughout the US. I've known David for, we were talking maybe 20 years. And he's really a creative city thinker. So I appreciate him being here today with us. We have Madeleine Spencer here. She's a placemaker and the co-director of Placemaking US. As a placemaker, Madeleine is involved in arts, education, engagement, economic development, and place management. She's going to talk to you and tell you what a placemaker actually does. It's really interesting. And then finally, we have John Bela. John is an urbanist and designer and an artist, and he's the principal of Bela Urbanism. It's based in the Bay Area. John has a background in landscape architecture, environmental design, biochemistry, and sculpture. And John's worked worldwide around issues of urban strategy, public realm design. I think we're really lucky to have his perspective here in Long Beach today for this discussion. So thanks for being with us, John. Our panel convened a few weeks ago online to talk about what we were gonna say on the subject of design and city economy. And we kind of framed the discussion around 5 themes. You could see them here on the screen. One is the role of design and how it plays into a thriving city today. How design intersects with inclusion and equity. What role the government should play in city design and for successful cities. We want to talk a little bit about whether city design its culture is organic or it can be directed. And finally, maybe we'll have time to talk a little bit about something very topical, which is post-pandemic. A lot of cities, ours included, have struggled, and how design can actually be a tool of resilience for cities in a post-pandemic economy. So we're going to have that discussion, but before we do that, each of our panelists is going to give a short presentation, and I'll start that here and talk a little bit about my firm, Studio 111. I'm a partner in Studio 111, along with my co-partner, Michael Bond. Michael, are you here? Oh, there he is. Okay, there's Michael. So go meet him at one of the breaks and get to know him as well. We both run Studio 111. It's a design practice dedicated to city repair and revitalization. And we're comprised of architects, urban planners, landscape architects, and our work spans affordable and infill housing, community retail, public realm improvements, mobility and transportation projects, all with a focus on environmental sustainability and social inclusion. There's a little video playing showing some of our projects. We work throughout all of California, really, but some of the local projects that you may know us for are the Long Beach Airport expansion, Laserfish headquarters on Long Beach Boulevard, the Design for Shoreline Gateway, which is that tower at Ocean and Alamitos just down the street, Long Beach Ronald McDonald House, the Lakewood YMCA, Long Beach Senior Arts Colony, and numerous parklets and infill projects throughout the city. But we're located right here in Long Beach. We work out of our office, which is right up the street at 3rd and the Promenade. It's a converted former Nordstrom Rack that we turned into a creative office space. I encourage you to visit anytime. It's not just our office, and a lot of you I know have probably been there. It's not just our office, but we also use it to engage with the community. We host numerous nonprofits within our space, including the Long Beach Accelerator and the Long Beach Community Design Center, as well as several other like-minded firms. And we have an artist in residence in our space, Mario Ibarra Jr., and I have to give him a plug. Mario's studio Slangwich is part of the Long Beach Museum of Art's newest exhibit, which is called Ordinary People. It opens tomorrow, so I'm going to encourage everyone to go. It looks super interesting. In our space, we also host community meetings, forums. We've recently hosted a Long Beach outpost of the this year's LA Design Festival. It's the first time it's ever happened in Long Beach, and I'm hoping it's an annual event. Right now, we have an exhibit from the U.S. Poster Festival, and we have posters up in our office. And there's some posters actually you could see on the promenade just down the street between 3rd and Broadway. So I encourage you while you're here to check that out as well. And we do all this at Studio 11 to help build a connected local creative economy, one that improves our business, but also improves the city around us. So that's a little bit about us, and I'm going to turn it over to David to talk a little bit about his work.
Thank you, Alan. And thanks for inviting me to participate in this panel. Good morning. So I've had the great fortune in my career to be involved in a number of transformational projects that have catalyzed positive change. And not coincidentally, all of them have had a major component of art, culture, artists, all of them creatively driven. And I'm going to start my mini tour here with the New Amsterdam Theater on 42nd Street. This is a project from my days at Walt Disney Company. We had the opportunity to bring back this extraordinary Art Nouveau theater on 42nd Street. And for me, it really opened a new window into possibility, how a project could do so much more than just improve the building itself, but really impact the broader community. This theater, which in its heyday was Flo Ziegfeld's house, had really gone to seed. It hadn't had live performance in 30 years, and it was a mess. And so we spent about $36 million and brought it back, and the first show was The Lion King, and it's been a spectacular success since then. But probably more importantly, it's taken what Rolling Stone called the most dangerous street in America, and once again, it's brought people back, which has been marvelous to watch, and about $2 billion of investment. And it all really started with a new master plan that envisioned arts and culture at the center. It took all the historic theaters and brought them back to life again. And the prior master plans were all about office and commercial, had all failed. It was really that new vision that Bob Stern created that turned this around. Emboldened by that, I tackled Hollywood Boulevard in my hometown, and over a period of 5 years, we did Hollywood and Highland. This project had what was then called the Kodak Theater and became the Dolby Theater. It's the home of the Academy Awards, and we felt it was important on Hollywood Boulevard to do something that was really rooted in the history of Hollywood. So it's right across the street from Roosevelt, which is where the Academy Awards started. Another key component of this project was 3 commissioned art pieces from local LA-based artists. And we think that added to the experience, to the layers of experience that we were trying to create for guests. Because our goal here really was to create a real Hollywood that would pay off the expectations of what people were hoping to find when they came to Hollywood, which we haven't fully done, but Hollywood's changed dramatically. And I'm now back again for my second act, which I'll talk about in just one second. Over the last 12 or 13 years, I've been involved in a project called Idea District, Innovation, Design, Education, and Arts in the Upper East Village. This was somewhat of an audacious effort, since when we started, we had no money and we had no tenants. We also didn't have any land, which, by the way, is not necessarily a bad recipe for trying to undertake a transformational project, because unburdened by the typical things that developers have, you adopt a different role. We became really more community organizers than developers, which had a lot of positive aspects to it. This 90-acre, 35-city block area, 25 of the blocks were blighted, had nothing on them or very little on them, and there's been an enormous amount of positive development, but not totally successful, which I'll talk about hopefully in the Q&A. This project is a mixed-use project, 296 units and commercial space and a couple of restaurants and a really neat outdoor space. One of the things that we felt was a big plus was bringing art and artists to the project. So in the center of this project called the Hub, we invited a group called Vanguard Culture, and they were essentially our programmers in residence. We gave them a free space, and they created a series of events, one of them Sensorium, which was wildly successful. They took 15 units and invited artists and just did all kinds of crazy stuff, and it was really fun, and started to create a different sensibility about that project, and it felt much more connected to community and more permeable than a typical multifamily project. We also got UC San Diego to come down. So I don't know how many have seen this new Park and Market installation for UC San Diego, but it's all about arts and programming and meetings, and has become a great meeting space for the larger community and for the arts and culture community in San Diego. It's just a block away from Idea One, right at the corner of Idea District. And my most recent passion is this project called Community Culture Campus at the corner of Sunset and Highland, across the street from Hollywood High and that iconic Chick-fil-A there. This is in entitlements right now. We are 2 years away from starting construction, but our belief is this is a new model for how to combine production and music and performance and office, and it will transform what right now is a blighted corner and hopefully create something really beautiful and become one of our visionary founders calls a Disneyland for artists. So we're really excited to see this one get built.
Great, thank you, David. Madeleine.
Thank you for inviting me, Alan. My catastrophic ripening into urban space began as a graduate activist in 2011. And the very first success was passing a transparency law in the city. My next opportunity began when I became a space manager in downtown Santa Ana, and the job was to look at the 800 businesses, the 99 historic buildings, and the 80 blocks in which I would manage. This is where I learned about what's called urban acupuncture. What I really needed to understand was the circulation and flows within the district. And when we began to understand how it worked, we were able to create events. For example, a district-wide event would bring in about 17 times the regular amount that was made throughout the season. One of the folks that really inspired me was Olafur Eliasson, because he asked some questions that I found to be very important, which were, how do we give authorship to people in public space? And how do we also help folks to become producers rather than consumers of space? In 2021, we were asked to build the placemaking network in the United States. And for the first year during COVID, we reached out to hundreds of placemakers across the country. And in 2021, we were able to take a road to recovery tour and visit all these projects in 70 cities and met 200 different placemakers throughout the US. Some of the things that I started to see happen over and over again is that there were a series of types of projects that were continuously being seen in these cities. Some of the different projects included tiny house villages, urban gardens, memorial spaces, third spaces, kid-friendly spaces, vacant lots, public market development, streetscape development, street repair, shuttered spaces being reopened, a wellness center, urban parks, cultural centers, and freeway removals. And there's over 60 going on throughout the United States. Another thing that I saw was the interventions that folks were doing that are similar to some of the things that you've been seeing. One of them is the is what I call the art intervention, which is a creative placemaking intervention. We have urban garden interventions, and it's a health wellness service hub. We also have the Living Cities intervention, and we have international Making Cities Livable intervention. This is a cornfield that was 80 acres of cornfield in the middle of, this is actually Indiana Carmel, and it is now a place with all the parking is underground, and it has spaces for folks to go through the whole city on bike or walking. This is the tactical urbanism intervention. This is our public market intervention, and this is here in Long Beach. And then how public markets also incubate businesses. You should be seeing some of these businesses here. This is also the rewilding work and workforce intervention, and a wellness and food hub intervention. From all of this, and also we have maker spaces. I've been creating a periodic table of urban restoration to be able to compile all of what I've seen.
Very cool. You need to make like a poster of that. We could like hand it out to the audience at some point. Can you just explain, you used the word tactical urbanism. Can you just explain to everyone what that is? How you define it?
Tactical urbanism, well, in the image that I was sharing, one of the great places in Portland, the Village Build Convergence, it really brings together a community actually, but it's using the streetscape and an intervention of the streetscape where it's typically unsafe. These public plazas are made in the street with paint. And one of the places that I've seen one of the greatest series of interventions has been New York City. All of Broadway has now become walkable ever since COVID. And they used paint to do it. There's a book called Street Fight by the one who is the head of planning there. And it is an amazing intervention for safety and also changing the whole district to become more walkable, bikeable, et cetera.
Great, thanks. Okay, John Bela.
Thank you, Madeleine. That's super inspiring and definitely resonate with the idea of authorship and trying to engage the public in having a sense of authorship, ownership, producers versus consumers of public space. Those are ideas which have really informed my work and my thinking. Thank you, Alan, for the invitation to be here. This is super cool. I've never been in Long Beach before. I got a chance to take a bike ride this morning on the Long Beach, and it was just beautiful. What a wonderful place you live in, and so inspired by the work you're doing and by the work you're all doing throughout the city to make this a beautiful spot. Wanted to talk a little bit today, go high level for a second, but it really ties into this idea of the relationship between city government and our communities in terms of agency, ownership, placemaking, and creation. So I've started to think about this as there's three different kind of high-level systems that shape cities. You have centralized hierarchies, our major city governments. You've got decentralized types of systems and then distributed systems, all working together to shape cities in different ways. Some examples of this to get tangible, the Medellin Metrocable, so, new, beautiful mobility infrastructure that connects to the favelas, these like user-generated settlements outside of many Latin American cities are now connected to the downtown by this totally modern, strategic intervention in terms of mobility infrastructure. So again, formal, informal, that relationship is what I'm really interested in. Another example, Alejandro Aravena's social housing approach, where the city, city funding, they build half of a house. And it's up to the resident, the user, to actually complete that project. So again, like that really creates a sense of ownership, literally, and producer versus consumer of a space. And that's so important in a government investment like social housing, where you're trying to build not just dwellings or space, but you're trying to build community and a sense of that ownership. So those are a couple examples. I'm interested in that relationship between the strategic, the tactical, the kind of technocratic versus the user generated, because I hope our cities, I want our cities to look less like this, less like a monoculture and really more like a coral reef, really diverse and inviting and nuanced and unexpected in a bunch of different ways. Tangible example of this in my work, many years ago, some friends and I, inspired by the artist Gordon Matta Clark, were seeking these niche spaces in San Francisco. We didn't find vacant space at the time, but we encountered the parking space and looked at it and said, wow, this is subsidized real estate in a super competitive real estate market like San Francisco. But here, for a couple coins in a parking meter, you could actually lease this space and do something different than store a car. So we came up with a number of different ideas. The one that really stuck was this concept called parking. So we literally put some coins in a parking meter, rolled out, so bench, tree, side, and then we withdrew to see what would happen. And indeed, people stepped off the sidewalk and started socializing, and we knew that the project was a success. A friend put this photo on the internet, it spread around the world, and it soon became, much to our surprise, a global public participatory event called Parking Day, which now is celebrated on the third Friday of September. It's now a global public participatory event, very much tied into placemaking, user-generated, tactical efforts globally, and continues to be a kind of tool for communities around the world who maybe are at the beginning of their advocacy around safer streets, more equitable streets, more greener streets. So in San Francisco, the city government, said, hey, we like this parking day idea. What if we made it more permanent? And so City of San Francisco really led the effort and actually engaged my firm Rebar, my art collective Rebar, to design one of the first parklets in San Francisco. And the idea was to rethink 25% of the city's land area that's dedicated to automobile movement and storage in San Francisco. I think that number is different in different cities. It might be larger here in Long Beach or in Los Angeles. But we came up with this idea of a modular system, and this is our very first parklet. This was on 22nd and Bartlett in San Francisco, based upon the success of these early pilots of converting curb lane uses into social spaces. The city of San Francisco created the public parklet program, and this is a new permit instrument. So Rebar, my art studio, did the guerrilla art intervention and did this first parklet. City government did the very difficult work of navigating the political process to create a new permit instrument to allow anybody who has a parking space in front of their home, business, art gallery to convert it into a new social space. And so over 10 years in San Francisco, about 70 public parklets were created. And that's part of a broader movement, I would say, of tactical urbanism, which has been involved in transforming places like Times Square in New York, and you mentioned Broadway. So this idea of testing ideas, low cost, testing ideas to inform long-term strategic change has really become a powerful part of the toolkit of placemakers and placekeepers globally, I would say. And then comes the pandemic. All of us are trying to figure out new ways to continue our lives, and a lot of that life ends up happening out in public space and in the streets in a radical new way. First 10 years of the parklet program in San Francisco, community creates 70 public parklets. Almost overnight during the pandemic, the city of San Francisco lowered the barrier for using curb lane uses. The city got out of the way, and in response, thousands of small businesses and cultural institutions and restaurants spilled into the street and created what are called shared spaces now. There are these, a lot of them are commercial outdoor dining structures, that literally saved probably thousands of service worker jobs and contributed a huge amount to the economy. But there's some challenges, a few of the spaces look like this, super cool, creative, commercial outdoor dining structures. We didn't have a pathway in San Francisco prior to this to serve food out in the curb lane. You couldn't, it was only takeout only. There were basically public spaces, and parklets were basically, you couldn't actually do table service. Now with the pandemic, of course, you're doing table service in these spaces. Some of them are very well designed. They're really supporting the adjacent restaurants and businesses, but unfortunately, because they were built so quickly, most of the spaces kind of look like this today. They were meant to last for 6 months or a year. Now they're kind of outdated. And so I'm working with a San Francisco nonprofit called the SF New Deal, a really great local organization. We're working on what's called a parklet patio kit of parts, a prefabricated, pre-approved design system that can kind of address the need for commercial outdoor dining and attempt to do this idea of supporting San Francisco small businesses to bring their spaces up to code. streamline the permitting, operations, and maintenance. So it's not just about the space, it's also about like a maintenance and care overlay. But really, something I'm particularly passionate about is balancing both commercial and community uses in our streets in the public right of way. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that today. Back to
Fantastic.
you, Alan.
Yes. Well, that parklet definitely discussion resonates with everyone here in Long Beach, where we're continuing talking about the use of that and had very similar experiences. So much here I want to talk to you guys about and have you talk to each other, but I'm going to start with like a big broad question about design and the economy. I think we can all agree that design is a critical component of creating a successful place. We can all agree with that. Let me ask you this then. Why do you think successful places are still important in a world which is becoming more virtual, more dispersed, and more hybrid? Let's start with you, David. Why is place still important to our economy?
Because we have an epidemic of loneliness in this country. We need each other. And great spaces compel people to come and share experiences together. And as a society, we have a dearth of those kinds of places, in fact. So one of the good things that came, I think, out of the COVID disaster was that there was more of an attitude of we need to take back space. We need to take back streets, and we need to take back other spaces for use by people, right? In a much more egalitarian kind of sensibility. So, we're a herd animal. We're always going to want to gather. And, the desire for us to see each other, to interact, to see the body language, it's never going to go away. I hope it never goes away. And, part of the work that I've done, all of us are doing, is trying to create those places that compel people to want to come and share experiences and, feel their humanity, the shared sense that we're all in this together.
Madeleine?
I just wanted to say that a nourishing physical space, there's nothing, it doesn't matter if you're virtual or not. You still go to your coffee shop, you still go to spaces where you can speak to people and connect with people. And I think that it is really important that the infrastructure is there to actually create those nourishing physical spaces.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's social infrastructure to support community. We're social animals, and we need those spaces. And if they're only, that kind of interaction is only mediated through commerce or through play or through one area, it doesn't fulfill the broad dimensions of who we are as human beings. So I think having those types of spaces is critical for expressing who we are as human beings.
Yeah, I would agree. The cities have occurred over thousands of years. They've been places to live, but they've been places of business. And we've had pandemics before, we've had crises before, but we still have cities and they've only grown. So I think there's something in our human nature that demands a strong sense of place. So you talked about creating a strong sense of place. You've all touched a little bit, and John and Madeleine talked a lot about, is a sense of place and design, is it bottom up? Is it top down? Is it both? You kind of touched on it. Needs to maybe, I'm thinking, be a little bit of both, but the right balance. Do you want to get into that a little bit? And I want to hear from a developer on that subject too.
Well, just going back to this idea of agency and the idea of inviting participation, I think the best way to do that is through some kind of balance of a strategic frame and then a real powerful and meaningful invitation for public participation. And I don't know the right answer. I think it's different in every community and in every context, actually, how you do that. But it's clear that if you have too much of one or the other, it actually doesn't work that well. So somehow balancing some sort of strategic vision with a powerful invitation for participation, that to me results in the best outcome.
The building form I've always loved the most is theaters, because to me it's a metaphor for the kind of work that I really love to do, which is to create a stage and then invite people to come and utilize that space, right? And when you do that, remarkable things happen. And it doesn't have to be a formal stage like the Kodak did. I mean, at the Hub at Idea One, we created a stage and we invited the community to display their creativity, and it was wonderful, whether it was a performance or a rehearsal or people just hanging out or somebody coming with their guitar. So I see a lot of the work that I do and working with architects like yourself is trying to imagine how do you create that stage that is compelling and exciting and fun, and people want to utilize it. They want to tap into their own creativity or get inspired by somebody else's creativity.
I think that the stage is a great metaphor. And Madeleine, you talked about the idea of people not just consuming a space, but being generators of the space. Can you just get into that a little bit more? What's the kind of space that we need to create to have that happen?
Right before that, I just want to say that it seems like as we develop and become more global, it feels as though we're also acting as though human beings are more disembodied in their relationship to space. And in truth, when people throw out like the physical aspect of being in space, it also tends to make there be a huge loss in our sense of even stewardship of space, because people can't be connected anymore. They don't have that relationship of connection that's really needed to even curate and be social and also fix the spaces that we're living in. So I just wanted to mention that. And your question though specifically was,
What kind of spaces should we be creating? What kind of design should we be promoting that allows people to generate their own use in the space and not just be consumers of space, but be part and parcel of it?
a lot of communities, especially communities and neighborhoods that are neglected, oftentimes they have brilliant visions of what they want, and they don't have an architect or a developer to help them create the spaces that they want in their communities. And unfortunately, because of that, it loses a lot of efforts in actually building those spaces. And one of the things we saw during the pandemic here in Long Beach was the May Center in Long Beach actually had this idea they needed to get food to their local community, and their way of figuring it out is we had architects and folks come together and build their plan for what became a marklet. And the marklet became the distribution center for folks in community to actually access food and actually to create a public space in a community, unlike spaces where restaurants and stuff had the access. But this is actually a neighborhood that now had that access. And they were able to, from that, turn it into a Cambodian night market and a whole bunch of other things. It was really incredible. But that is a group in community that actually were able to utilize their infrastructure because you gave them the ability through the flex zoning idea to actually create that marklet.
Great. John.
Just a thought on, so, I think we've made a lot of momentum in terms of streets and reclaiming streets for public use, for public participation. Just, it occurs to me that what types of spaces do we need to work on creating that create that invitation? It's how do we do that in the context of our housing crisis in California? I've been looking around the world for different models about how people think about housing as a right versus a commodity. And, looking at places like Vienna, where 60% of the housing is social housing, where it's super high quality, or the Baugruppen model in Germany, where the German government foresaw a sort of housing crisis 30 years ago and set up a lending institution for communities to get together to build their own housing. And so, with the barriers being lowered for more housing happening in California, we're going to see a lot of new housing built. Yep. And I'm just concerned that how much of that is really going to be create that invitation, be supportive, catalyze social interaction in a way that, if it's not necessarily connected to or driven more by communities' values around the types of spaces that they want to live, the way they want to live together. So I'm curious about, can we complement our other pathways to housing with models like co-housing, models like the Baugruppen, models where community is actually shaping the space that they live in a more tangible way.
Well, sadly, I think we're out of time. I still have so much more questions, but maybe we can continue the conversation at one of the breaks and we can get some audience participation as well at that point. But please thank the panelists for being here and sharing their knowledge.